I manage to only.
We will call the January 27th meeting of the Eugene City Council together for a work session. The mayor is in Washington, D.C., attending the United Front meeting, which is a very important meeting for the region and for the city, and cannot be with us this evening. So we have a slight modification to the agenda that was published earlier. We're going to skip committee reports and items of interest and go directly into a work session on rest stop extension. So who wants to?
I'm going to turn over to Glenn to introduce the topic for us.
Where's Chris's Council, last Friday you received an email from John that explained that in order to not have the rest stop ordinance sunset, that you needed to have a public hearing mid-February so that you'd be able to take action by the end of February. As part of John's email to you, there was a suggested motion. It included a blank so that you could decide, do you want a 2-month extension, a 6-month extension, a 1-year extension? That motion, and I'll just read it in case you don't have John's email with you, would be, I move that the city manager bring back for public hearing on February 18th a proposed ordinance extending the sunset on the rest stop ordinance until blank, and then you just fill in the blank. We're not asking you to decide tonight to extend it. You need to do that by ordinance. We're just asking you that you say, here's how long you want to have included in the proposed ordinance for the public hearing, and then we'll bring that ordinance back on February 18th.
So we would be voting on instructions of the city manager to bring back an ordinance.
Correct, with how long the extension should be.
So we could talk today about what would be the content of that motion he'd bring back in terms of the length.
Correct.
Okay. I will open it up for discussion. Councilor Brown.
I have a question. When is the current sunset date for the
March 31.
March 31.
My birthday.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Polney.
So the original sunset was, the original trial period was 3 months, 6 months?
The original trial, I think, was about 5 months. The expectation at the time that the council adopted that is we'd have about a 5-month trial, but because of the length of time it took to get the first rest stop up and running, we haven't had that 5-month trial. That's why we're recommending that you extend it.
Okay. Well, it only, it only makes sense. It was a decision by a majority of the council to go ahead and do a test period with these rest stops with a date-specific sunset. But since we are having difficulty finding the second coordinator of the rest stop and getting it up and running, I think it's only fair that we go ahead and extend that and keep the trial period the same length of time. So I don't know how far we'd have to extend it, but that would be my opinion as far as how long the extension should be, is just extend the original period of time out.
Clarification, the original time in the original motion?
The original sunset date, if it was, like 5 months, well, let's go ahead and extend it out so it has a full 5 months to run once the second one gets up and running.
So 5 months from the beginning of the second?
I think that would only be fair.
Okay. Any other? Councilor Evans?
Yeah, I was going to point out, I think that we were supposed to be up and running about the 1st of November with the current rest stop situation, but that didn't happen until like the first week of December. So 2 months from the end of March 31st would put us out at the end of May. Do we need to be that specific or just be specific with 5 months as the time? Is that your intention, Councilor Poling?
I just think that it should be the same amount of time, and I don't know if we need to come up with a date specific. If we do, then yeah, the end of May, and I can look at the calendar and come up with a date.
Okay. Yeah.
If the council just wants to tell us, it should be 5 months from whether it's the start of the first rest stop or what I heard Councilor Poling say is the start of the second rest stop. If you give us that direction, we can figure out the right date, and we'll just put it into the proposed ordinance, so you don't have to do that tonight.
Okay. So we'll take that into consideration as we craft a motion. Anything else?
No.
Councilor Zelenka.
So this is an ordinance, right?
Correct.
And so would we need a public hearing
Yes, and that's why what we're proposing is that you direct us to bring back for a public hearing on February 18th, and then that gives you till the end of February to actually adopt the ordinance.
And how much leeway do we have in changing that amount of time if we put that out as the draft ordinance and well, let's say 5, I mean, maybe we say we want it to be a year.
Complete leeway. You have the public hearing if you decide you want it to be less than 5 months, more than 5 months permanent. After the public hearing, you could do any of those.
Okay.
So the language in the draft ordinance would be a draft that could then be altered.
Absolutely.
To any time, specific time.
Councilor Clark.
I'd like to suggest that we, because we don't know the date yet, we make it the 31st of May. There's also the issue of, we haven't had a conversation about how to deal with the difference in number of potential folks utilizing that opportunity during the summer months. And I think it would be wise for us to sunset it at the end of May, and that would give us a time certain when we would have to plan for how we would deal differently with what we usually get in what we would call, I suppose, travelers in the summertime.
Okay? Okay? Yes.
Just a couple of thoughts. One is if we extend it just to May, which would give the first rest stop a chance to have its full 5 months, I think it'll be very difficult to fulfill the second rest stop, because the reality is you get it up and running and then it's only a couple months, and it does take time to put these things together, to actually accept applications and sort of get those into place. And so there's a couple of options you might consider. One would be is having it the 5 or 6 months from kind of that date, or just beyond March. One of the things to remember is if it's not working, the ordinance gives me the authority to shut that down at any time. And so as far as worrying about there may be something going on out there that you have no ability to control, the other side of that is if you think it's a viable alternative at all, if we really want a kind of to see how it works through the entire seasons of the year, maybe it's okay to extend it out for a year, and it's harder, but you get a chance to take a look at it through the entire season. So that would be another alternative, depending on what your objective is in doing this. But at least I would suggest more than the 5 months from the first rest stop in order to allow the second one even a chance to get up and going. But again, it's what is it you're trying to achieve, the rest stops in a near term and or a little bit more extended time.
Okay. Anyone else in the first round? Councilor Taylor.
I would think at least a year, and I think the possible termination date should not be in the middle of winter, whatever time we. So I would suggest a year from May 31st, perhaps.
Okay. I'll put myself in the first round just quickly. For me, it's less about the specific time than about fair trial. And so whatever amount of time provides for a fair trial for not just the first site, but for the second one, once it's up and running, to me would be what my interest would be, my best outcome. So I don't know if that's a specific amount of time or whether that's what's an amount of time that provides for a fair trial to does this work. We're already getting input from the first side. I'd like to see it when we have a couple running to see how it works. I'll put you in the second round. Okay, and you're still first round. Okay.
Thanks, and then Councilor Evans.
Yeah.
So I tend to feel the same way as Chris. My thinking is, 6 months from the start date of the second rest stop seems like that gives that second site time. That might bump it to July, depending on when they get set up. But I don't know if we could frame an ordinance in that way, if we still have to have a specific date.
When you adopt the ordinance, it will need to have a specific date because it's a sunset, and
Right.
and everybody needs to know it's going to sunset on this date.
Right.
For tonight, you don't need to do that because we'll figure out what that date is based on the criteria and put that into the proposed ordinance.
Okay. Perfect. That completes round one. So we begin round two with Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Yes, I think what the manager said is very sensible. I like a year. I like a year's time from the second site, because that gives gets time to set it up, and we have I believe that we have every reason to believe that they'll both be successful, just judging on the way that Opportunity Village has been running. There have been no problems whatsoever. It's very well managed, very conscious efforts by all the residents and the group that's managing it, and I believe it'll be the same at the 2 rest stops. However, it does take time, and we need to keep in mind that if unforeseen serious problems do develop, the manager, of course, has the authority to close either one or both down. So, but I like what Councilor Taylor said about let's not have the close date be in the winter. I mean, I'd kind of like to see, if we want to put a date specific, I personally would like to see a date of March 31st, 2015, because that's a year from the current sunset date. And that allows both of them to be up and running and fully developed. And I am personally not worried about the so-called travelers. These will be fully occupied by our local unhoused way before, the unhoused by choice start showing up in town. I don't think that's anything to be concerned about. But I think we need at least a year, and if it's going to sunset, it should be in the springtime, after the most severe weather is passed. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Councilor Zelinka.
So when, go ahead.
Oh, I don't need to interrupt you. Just when you have a moment, if you can call on me.
I will. Okay. Right after Alan.
All right. So Opportunity Village has a sunset date. When is that? October of next year. Of 14, right. We're in the next year, right? Okay. And so that was a year. A little over a year. Okay. And that pulls it right up to the point before winter really kicks in. This is indeed, and how long will it take to get a second rest stop up and running?
We have an interested party that is willing to do that. I think they've indicated that it could take them a couple of weeks to get it up and going, although I think what we would try to do is also find a partner for them to try to do that sooner than that. But you're plus or minus.
So a couple of weeks might be extending to end of February, potentially, and if we did a year, it'd be the end of February.
Yeah, end of February, first part of March.
Or first part of March, right. Okay. And we also had a conversation about potentially taking that second site, which you've already identified, and there's potentially enough room there for 2 sites. If we did that, that would require council action, wouldn't it, to institute a third site, because we've only authorized the city manager to do 2.
Right.
Even though it's on the same site.
Right.
Okay. Again, this is a pilot program. It does need a fair trial. I think 6 months or longer is the minimum amount of time that we need is 6 months. Maybe a year seems appropriate. I think if we did 6 months from February, we're in the middle of the summer. Or somewhere in that fall time frame would work too. Maybe 9 months would be a compromise. And it should be, I think if we said 6 months or 6 to 9 months after the second one gets up and running would be an appropriate thing to do. And again, I'm not worried about some of these concerns that have been brought up. They are limited to 15 people. They're supervised, so that's not all comers kind of thing, and they have garbage and toilets, so they're going to be more organized like the one we have on Roosevelt. They're limited in their scope, and if we want to expand that second site into 2 separate sites, we'd have to come back for council action, which we could think about that some more as well.
Okay. Great.
So one of your options is to put into the ordinance a longer period of time, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, that what the ordinance does, it authorizes the city manager to have rest stops subject to council approving the specific sites. It doesn't require the manager to do it. So if you have a longer period and things aren't working, either the manager can shut it down or the manager can come back to you and say, boy, I'm thinking about shutting these down because they're not working quite like we thought. Just because you say that the ordinance is going to sunset in 12 months doesn't mean that the city has to allow those to continue. The difference between putting a longer period of time in and moving back, like you don't want to continue it for the entire 12 months, versus you try it for 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and then needing to extend again, is in order to extend again, you'll have to have a public hearing and an ordinance. If you put in the longer version now, the manager can have a conversation with you, and if everybody agrees, yeah, we should shut this down, the manager can shut it down long before the year. The ordinance will still sunset on its own after a year, but there aren't rest stops occurring during that period.
Okay. Very helpful. Councilor Poling.
Yeah, I just, I'm okay with extending the sunset date because of the late startup of the first one and the delayed startup of the second one. But I'm not okay with extending the sunset period or the trial period from the original motion. And that's why I said, I'd be willing to extend it based on those two facts, but I'm not willing to extend the trial period any more than the original motion that we passed.
Okay. Councilor Evans.
Two things. Question for staff. One, do we have an assessment and evaluation component that staff is looking at in terms of assessing the effectiveness of the camp and also the where we are in terms of my second point, and that is a transition plan with the county in terms of providing the kind of services that these folks need and possibly developing some kind of interim shelter, because we will be back at this again and again if we don't have what I consider an exit strategy that's good for both the people who are in these camps and for the city. And the exit strategy, as far as I'm concerned, is some kind of transitional plan that moves the county into this as per their social services and human services charge.
We do not have a transition plan with the county to this point. The first part of the question of how do we evaluate, our primary evaluation will be public health and safety. And so that will be based on the healthiness of the site and also the safety of those that are on the site or providing services into the site. Those are the primary criteria that we'll be taking a look at, which for me will be if we get to the point where we have to consider shutting it down, I suspect those would be the two primary reasons why we would think about doing that. The exit strategy is currently the final exit strategy is the sunset date on the ordinance. The second piece of that would be is, you might remember with the Opportunity Village, the outcome for that is to try to transition it from its current facility onto another site, and so we will continue to work with them at trying to do that as well.
Could that assessment also take in the surrounding property owners?
Yes, thank you. That also would be an important part of that assessment, is the impact on the neighborhoods. Yes, thank you.
Great. I stuck myself into primarily to ask a question. It sounds that I'm not hearing any opposition to an extension around the table, but I am hearing concerns about how long the extension should be. So it seems something we might consider doing is adopting a motion to extend. We could plug any time in tonight or ask you to bring back any time tonight to move this forward. In the meantime, during that period, could we get just a quick appraisal of what the pros and cons are of the different timelines? What might be the advantages or disadvantages of 5 months versus 6 months versus 12 months, so that we could see what we're working with, and then we'll also receive feedback at the public hearing regarding the different timelines. But to move it forward, it sounds like we want to go ahead and adopt an extension. We could plug any time into it and then figure we're going to be working it through. But I would be interested in knowing what you consider to be the advantages and disadvantages of those different timelines. Is that possible?
Yeah, what we could provide, and maybe what we do is, to keep it relatively simple, we say, here's for a year and here's for whether it's 5 or 6 months from if you'd like it from the date of the first one that got implemented, or from this, well, maybe there's three. Maybe it's X amount from when the first one was up and going, 5 or 6 months, 5 or 6 months from when the second one gets put in, or a year from March 31st, and maybe it's those three.
Just so, something like that.
So we can provide some additional information around that.
That would be helpful. We're now moving into our third round, and then we'll need a motion pretty quickly. I've got two people in it so far, Councilor Zelinka and Councilor Clark, and Councilor Evans. And Brown.
I understand. The reason I asked about the Opportunity Village when it sunsets October 31st, I'm wondering if it isn't smart for us from an efficiency standpoint with regard to meetings and staff work and all that other stuff to make everything be on the same time frame so that the OVE sunset day or Opportunity Village sunset day is the same as the rest stops, and then everything's kind of in the, then the pilots are, they're two slightly different things going on, but they're very, very similar. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be more efficient to also include in this, can we do that? Does the ordinance also include the change of the sunset day of the Opportunity Village, or is that a separate ordinance?
We could combine those in the same ordinance, but if what you're talking about is extending the sunset of the rest stops to match the Opportunity Village already has the end of October sunset date.
No, I was thinking extending the Opportunity Village one to be 1 year after the second one gets up and running.
Oh, you could give that direction.
That would push out the Opportunity Village one.
Right, we could put both of those in the same ordinance and bring it back for the public hearing on February 18th.
It's not like ballot titles where we can only have one topic.
Right.
Okay. So that might be something to consider for later on. Councilor Clark.
It's interesting how we started on this discussion months ago and how we're boiling the frog, if you'll pardon the metaphor, that we're moving the bar very slightly, little bits and little bits and little bits. I could agree with you that we should evaluate all of them at the same time, because in principle that sounds efficient. I would want to do it this fall or at the end of this fall. I think that would give us sufficient time with the others, and it would give us a year with that. And if you're suggesting that we match the rest stops to what already exists for the Opportunity Village, I'd certainly go along with that. The interesting thing that was said, for me anyway, was what Greg said about the county. Now, one of the things we know from this discussion is that any expansion from this point forward of additional rest stops provides an opportunity for controversy and debate. We've been down that road before, and all of us have experienced that, and there's, a great deal more in store for us if that's the direction we want to go. I think that there exists an opportunity because, as I've said before, this, to my mind, is a county responsibility, just like our human services resources are pooled with Springfield and with the county to work together on what is a regional problem. This very much is a regional problem, and it could be dealt with more effectively together. So they also have a great deal more land with which that might be acceptable for doing this. They have parks with camping facilities that sit idle in the course of the winter. I think that it's an interesting idea to say, well, what would it look like if we, I don't know how the county would feel about using Richardson or one of the other, one of their other parks where camping facilities exist in the course for this sort of thing. But I would very much like to see, as a part of this motion, us direct staff to begin discussion with the county about what would that look like and what would their interest level be and what would the process be by which we transition this larger issue to the county where it more properly resides, in my opinion.
If it doesn't get offered as part of the main motion, you could always offer it as an amendment or something like that. Okay, we now have two more left in the queue. Councilor Evans?
I just would echo what Councilor Clark just said. I think that we need to have some stipulation to direct the manager to enter into conversations, if not negotiations, with Lane County about a transitional plan to work through this, because I can foresee us going down the road of we get to the end of, get to the sunset of this, and then we're out to another extension, and we're not solving the problem, and we're not really dealing with it. It will just go on and on and on. I think that we really need to have a serious conversation about how we transition it to the proper authorities who have the proper resources to do with it. Maybe they don't have as much resources as they had in the past, but those resources, human service resources, are housed at the county, and I think that we need to begin to have a robust conversation, particularly with the human services staff, about how we make that transition, and also possibly including some of the private nonprofit providers in that conversation as well. Because we don't have the expertise to do this, and we don't have the staff to do this.
Councilor Brown, then I'll ask for a motion.
Thank you. Well, I just want to stress that I think, we really need to extend this to a year, and I like Councilor Zelenka's idea of extending the Opportunity Village. We got a memo a few days ago from the Director of Shelter Care. Their waiting list is 700 people. This problem's not going to go away in a year. And so rather than having to do new motions to keep extending and like every 6 months or every 9 months, I think we should just be realistic and extend it for a year for all of them and pick the same date. There'll be plenty of time for evaluation. If problems occur, one or all can be shut down. The general sense is of the providers that I've talked to is that, this isn't the ideal solution, but in lieu of anything else, it's working pretty well, and it's providing a very important component for somebody's life who's unhoused. Now they know where they can go every night, and then they can keep their stuff there safe. And so it's provided tremendous stability for, it's just a few people, but it's something. You're helping some people. And that's how you attack a problem. You don't try to figure it out all at once, because we can't. We don't have the money and the resources to do that overnight. So you start the way we've been doing. And I want to commend council and staff and manager for this, because I think it's a very sensible way to approach the problem. And so I really think we should extend it for a year. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Sure.
got me.
Well, before, can I, just a point of clarification, does the motion need to have a date in it? Can't just be a blank?
Right, because the ordinance has to have a date in it, but as...
The motion is to bring an ordinance.
Yeah.
Right.
But the motion, anyway.
It can be
let me put it out,
after
you
the
correct me
second
if there's a
one.
problem. So I move the city manager bring back for public hearing on February 18th a proposed ordinance extending the sunset on the rest stop ordinance until July 1st, 2014.
A second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. Councilor Clark.
I'd extend it past the fall, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
for the rest stops.
October 31st is the...
I'll make that amendment and then speak, if I get a second, to make it October 31st for the rest stops.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that, as I mentioned, putting them at the same time with that is a good idea, but, there's a key but, I agree with George. When we read that note from Susan, and we know that there's 700 folks that are unhoused and on waiting lists to even get into a place, our 15 spots at this camp and 15 spots at that camp don't make a significant dent in the actual problem. I'd like to see us do more to actually solve the problem rather than just continue on this effort, which, although something, isn't a significant solution to the problem. I don't want to go through another winter and another time frame of saying, look what we did, gosh, isn't this great? While it might be nice, it doesn't actually solve the problem. Now, I don't think, frankly, that the city of Eugene is equipped to solve the problem regionally, and I think we ought to be doing it in conjunction with the county on a larger scale. So that's why I want to see us take a look at what we've learned come the fall, the end of October, see what we've learned, start the process of talking with the county, and look at what we might do to actually make a bigger dent in solving this problem. so that we don't have to go through another winter like this last one for folks that need a place to be. Thanks.
Okay, we're still debating the amendment. Councilor Zelenka.
Well, I think it's a brilliant idea to change it to October 31st, but I agree. This isn't a solution, actually. This is a Band-Aid. This is a temporary facility that we're trying out to see how it works. If it works, maybe it could become a permanent solution in some way, form or another. Maybe it rotates around or something like that, or maybe it gets shifted around to the different parts of the city. But this isn't the solution. I agree. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of trying to craft a solution. And I really hope our other governmental partners will step up and start talking to us about this in a cooperative sense. So far, that hasn't occurred. And also at the state level, I think, for instance, if the bungalows and Conestoga huts are very successful, and they appear to be, right now they don't meet code, and they are temporary shelters, and basically they're sheds. They don't have plumbing or electrical or any kind of heating in them, which makes them okay on the code side, at least temporarily. What I'd be interested in is towards the end of this pilot period, in that October timeframe, hopefully, that as part of that conversation, we start thinking about how we can amend the state code to allow for micro-housing units that have a little bit more structure to them, that can be in that $2,500 range, that's affordable, that can create more of a solution, and that looking towards the 2015 legislature for potential action, because I think it would require the state legislature to act on that. So as part of that mix and evaluation of the pilot, I hope we're looking towards that solution anyway, because micro-housing, I think, is part of the solution. I don't think it's the solution, but I think it's part of the solution about how we move forward. We've also talked about shelters, and we've talked about other things. A lot of the things that we're talking about are very expensive, however, so I agree, and I'll support the October 31st date.
Okay. Counselor.
If it should actually be closed at October 31st is a terrible time. It's the beginning of cold weather.
Okay.
So I don't know whether we're discussing other possibilities or not at this point.
That's my next motion.
I think we might dispose of this amendment, and then we can bring others up if we want.
There are other things that I'd like to talk about.
Okay. Would you like to finish up on the amendment?
I'm going to make my ask for the queue is another motion of another amendment after we dispose of this one.
Okay. Is there any other discussion of this current amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Councilor Clark's amendment to change the date signify by raising their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed? 2, it passes. So the new date in the main motion is now October 31st. Councilor Clark.
I would also add an amendment to that we direct city manager to begin negotiation with the county for how we might work more effectively on a project together, or transition that responsibility to them.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion of the proposed amendment to conversations with the county, to initiate conversation?
I just need some clarification on what that really means.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
I suppose the better way to say that is direct the manager to bring back to council options in conjunction with discussions with the county for how we might transition this to a more regional approach.
So it's exploratory is what you're
Right.
looking for.
Well, I report back to council on options after you've spoken with the county administrator, acting administrator.
I'm trying to picture in my mind what that actually looks like, so I'm not sure what it is yet. So maybe if there's a way that says, we bring, I'm not sure we bring back that you can kind of see if we're headed in the right direction or something. I'm just trying to get a sense
If I
of
can
what
speak
that is.
just
Yeah.
freely to that, I can say, we don't know at this moment if there's the will in the county commissioners to do exactly that, to create space like we've created space here to see if that could work. What we have created here isn't anywhere near capacity to the need, and we don't have it. And we could talk about it till we're blue in the face, and we'll never come up with enough space to deal with and solve the problem the way we're doing it now. The only way we will is if we work well together with the county, and they have an interest in doing something regionally. So I don't know, I want to constrain them as little as possible by saying we'd like to invite them to start a conversation about what that might look like if they want to work together to create space sufficient to the need at the county level.
I'm just trying to make sure I get
Please do.
clarification. So I don't remember, the last one-night count was, what, 1,400? 1,700. And that was in kind of a broader, not just Eugene, that was a little bit broader.
Lane County.
Countywide.
So is what you're asking is whether or not the county would like to work with us on a plan to figure out how to house 1,700 people?
How to make a much more significant dent in the need than we're able to do as a city.
Okay.
Could I just ask for a clarification? Are you talking jurisdictionally about those areas where Eugene and Lane County overlap, or are you talking about Eugene wanting to be in partnership with the county on entire counties?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think this is a regional problem. If you had to look at some of the people who were housed at any of these particular areas, some of them may have grown up in Springfield, some of them may have grown up in Creswell. They're from the area, but maybe they spend most of their time in Eugene. What I'm saying is this is a regional problem, and we need to be working together, better together regionally to solve it, and the county has much larger potential places where people might be, and a greater number of them. So I would say that, we want to work together to find ways to address this effectively with more resources than we have as a city to put towards it.
Yeah, I think the partnership is a great idea. We just want to make sure we're clear on the jurisdictional aspects.
Well, and like I said, I want to leave it as wide open as possible so that he can negotiate with them and see what they're interested in doing and then make a report back to us.
Okay. Councilor Brown, did you want?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Councilor Clark, I just want to make sure I understand what this other amendment is. Are you suggesting that the manager asked the county, do they have lands where they would be willing to turn into rest stops? Is that part of it?
That may be a part of the
If
discussion.
they could find sponsors like we have. Yeah, okay. Well, I think I could probably support that then, because I think that once all of ours are up and running, then we will, and the months go by, there'll be a track record that everyone can look at, and they could perhaps decide, yes, this is a viable model. Is it ideal? No, of course it's not ideal. Will it help some people? Yes, it will help some people. Maybe we could do that too, so I think that's probably not a bad idea. Thank you.
I'll just stick myself in here for a brief second. I can support it because I think what you're trying to get to is we're much stronger when we work in partnership. If the City of Eugene tries to take this on by itself, it's only limited in what it can do. If it can do it with a partner, it can be much more effective as long as the partnership operates at an appropriate level. And if that's what you're saying, yeah, I think that's probably a desirable outcome to work toward. We're stronger when we're together. Okay. That's on the amendment. Councilor Taylor.
Would you accept a friendly to include Springfield?
One step at a time, I think maybe next time. So I guess the answer is no,
Okay.
just for now. I agree that we should, but I think I'll say no just for now.
If they want to join in.
If they want to
They
join,
want
hey,
to.
beautiful.
Yeah. Okay.
Having listened to the conversation, I have some alternative language that I think captures what you're intending.
I love it when he does that.
Direct the manager to initiate a conversation with the county about potential regional solutions to address homeless issues.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what he said.
That's what he meant?
Well said, Mike.
Not well said.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
I
the
accept it.
maker of the amendment and the second believe that is the language that they intended to use, so that is currently the amendment. Is there any other discussion of the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any opposed? It stands passed. Okay, so that has now been added to the main motion. Do we need to reread the main motion in order to know everything that's in it? No? Are we clear? All right. Any other debate? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as amended, please signify by raising their right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Appreciate the conversation. Councilor Surratt wanted to also, and this is related to this item, bring up an issue, and then I'll get Councilor Taylor.
So thank you. I just wanted to let the council know that at the Wednesday work session, I hope to introduce a motion that would have us consider adding another rest stop, potentially at 8th and Mill, although I have spoken with the city manager about potentially bringing us some other site options with my intention to try to find one that is wheelchair accessible. So the city manager and the council have received a proposal from some folks to manage a third rest stop. And I believe that some of what they're proposing would be to take some of the more challenging folks who are currently at Whoville and who've had an especially negative impact on the downtown businesses when Whoville was not in existence, and relocating some of those folks to this new rest stop should the council choose to add a site to make 3 rest stops. So I didn't want to do that tonight. I wanted to just preview that. That's my intention for Wednesday's work session.
Would that require a ordinance or an amendment?
Neither. To add a third site requires just the council by motion approving the third site. That then gives the manager the authority to enter into an agreement for that site.
Okay. Good clarification. Councilor Taylor.
My question is, what could council do to delay or stop the closing of Whoville?
The council has the authority under the city code, just like the mayor has the authority to declare something, you have the authority to approve by motion, in essence, a site for overnight camping. That's what you did in order to authorize Occupy when it was at the Washington Jefferson location. So by motion, you could do that. The council has the same authority as the mayor. Yours is actually a little broader.
Okay.
So if I made a motion tonight, this would be in order.
If you make a motion and it passes, then yes. What you should realize, though, if you make that motion and the council passes it, that means that whatever site you include in there is not subject to the prohibited camping ordinance, which means if, and I know literally you can't have this, but if 400 people wanted to go locate on that site, the city wouldn't be able to do anything about it unless there was a violation of some other law, and then the police could deal with that violation. But if you exempt that site from the prohibited camping ordinance, then anybody who wants to locate there can. The people who are there now will not have any authority, any legal authority, to exclude anybody. Because what you will have done is to say that site is now open for overnight camping, and just like somebody, some member of the public can't come down here and say, you can't be here, everybody has the same right to be here. If you do that, then recognize them. That site could grow. Anybody could locate there.
Is there anything we could do to people have voluntarily established something that's working, even though we didn't authorize it? Is there any way that we can say, don't stop it without?
You could, the council could pass a motion asking, because the manager has the authority to enforce the code, and that's what he is in the process of doing. The council certainly has the authority to say, city manager, we request that you not do that. So, but you cannot, in essence, suspend the ordinance without actually adopting an ordinance suspending the ordinance. So you can't do by motion what would require an ordinance to do. What the code does allow you to do, the prohibited camping ordinance does allow you to say that ordinance doesn't apply in a certain location. But then it doesn't apply for anybody.
Thank you.
Extra folks there. Councilor Evans.
So I have a question. So if we were to designate the Whoville site as a second rest stop with the 15-person limitation, would that be more appropriate than, and I don't mean to, dish your suggestion, Betty, but that would be, in my mind, more appropriate than leaving it open-ended. But, we can't have 30 people there. We can't have 20 people there. We can't have 15 would be the limit.
Okay.
So I'm just asking the question, and, if the manager or the attorney can give us some clarification on that, would that be appropriate under the current ordinance that we have with regard to,
The legal answer to your question is the council has the authority by motion to approve a site. So if the council decides to approve the current Whoville site, you can do that by motion. If you do that, it doesn't mean that people are lawfully entitled to camp there. Instead, it means that the city manager is now authorized to enter into an agreement with the site manager. That site manager then gets to decide who it is that will get to reside there. But it would be up to the site manager at that point. Wouldn't happen until after that site manager is selected. The site manager enters into the agreement. The site would be subject to all of the same provisions as the other rest stops. So.
got it.
We're running up against time barriers, so I'm going to ask Councilor Brown to be the last person in this discussion, and we will pick it back up again on Wednesday. So this isn't the end of it. We'll be talking about it more on Wednesday. Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be real quick. I think maybe we ought to continue the discussion on Wednesday, because I think some of us are kind of headed in the same direction. We don't want to see people needlessly dispersed from something that's working unless they can move to another place that, and continue perhaps a third rest stop or a health stop, has been called by some of the proponents. So I'm looking forward to Wednesday's conversation. Thank you.
Can you do it in like 30 seconds?
30 seconds. Also, could we look at putting a cap on the number of rest stops?
I thought we did.
It is, too.
It's two.
It's two right now, okay, because I'm thinking 3 in my head, because,
We'd have to
never
add.
mind, I'm good, 2.
So, I think there is a good conversation to be had on Wednesday. Think of the elements. I know that there are some moving parts going on right now. Some people have some proposals, including what Councilor Surratt's working on. So there may actually be some workable solutions that come out of Wednesday's discussion that could perhaps represent a win-win. So we'll pick that back up. So I will then move into item number B, which is the work session on fireworks.
Just a
You can
point
put
of
me in the
order.
queue.
Point of order. What's happening to the IPM discussion? Is it getting bumped to a
Getting
different date?
rescheduled. It'll be scheduled
Good.
before your spring break.
Break, okay.
Great. Okay.
You got me.
Al Gerard and Scott Fellman will be leading this discussion.
Where do they sit?
Yeah, really. They took the staff.
Yeah, we took all the chairs.
Good evening. I'm Scott Fellman, Lieutenant with Eugene Police Department. With me tonight is Fire Marshal Al Gerard. We'd like to start with just a brief overview of the work that staff has done looking at fireworks, a little bit of look at the safety issues that we're seeing, and then leave the rest of the time for questions and deliberation. Essentially what staff has done is we've looked at our local issues in terms of complaints and history of fireworks enforcement or lack thereof, and we've looked at what other communities around the country have done to try to address those issues. We found that it boils down to essentially 2 different issues with fireworks, specifically that there are legal fireworks, those fireworks that are authorized under state law, which is basically anything that travels less than 6 inches up in the air, less than 12 inches up in the air and less than 6 feet laterally across the ground. And then illegal fireworks, which we see every 4th of July, Roman candles, airburst mortars, those types of fireworks. The issues essentially boil down to 2. Noise, which is everything from an inconvenience to people in their homes to a major health and safety issue for people's pets and for combat veterans who may have adverse reactions to those types of noise, taking them back to bad experiences that they've had or stressful experiences that they've had in their past. The other issue is, of course, safety. Particularly this last summer, when it was very, very dry around the 4th of July. The risk to the community for fire and personal safety is substantial. It's a community issue. One of the things that we've seen is that over time, the folks that are using the illegal fireworks, these are not criminals. These are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are otherwise law-abiding members of our community who at 4th of July celebrate using fireworks that aren't necessarily allowed by law. And it's a pervasive issue that's evolved over time, so that any solution that we're likely to come up with to mitigate what currently happens is also likely to take some time, some years, before we see whatever goal is set actually reached.
So some of the risks that we see with fireworks, some of the risks we see with fireworks specifically are due to weather conditions typically. If you're using any type of firework, if you have low humidity conditions, very warm weather, you have the opportunity to have an accidental fire at a higher rate. And that is even if they're used correctly. But make no mistake, legal fireworks sold in the state of Oregon, while being not without risk, are still quite safe in comparison to the proliferation that we see of illegal fireworks, the airburst mortars, the bottle rocket type fireworks. Those are a high risk for wildland fire, as well as property destruction to people's houses and structures. With good conditions and good practices, such as following the instructions on the fireworks, the risk is manageable, provided the conditions are good. But what we see a lot of times is with the importation, the illegal importation of illegal fireworks, incorrect usage. These fireworks that are meant for public displays by a technician certified by the state of Oregon in the use of illegal fire, for use in public display fireworks, those fireworks are not well suited for the lay person. You need specific training, and you're prone to a lot of accidents, and those accidents can take the form of property destruction again. So we've had some significant fires in the past. Last year we had a house that was lost, about a $700,000 loss on Lakeview, 2200 block of Lakeview. Multiple injuries every year. Some examples of injuries in Medford, a gentleman on June 29th damaged one hand severely when he was trying to relight one of those illegal mortars. Saturday in Spokane, a guy lost a hand while he was trying to, well, I don't know what he was doing, but he was driving down the road and he had an M1000, which is a rather large firecracker about the size of a soup can. And then a few years ago in 2007, we had a tragic death of a 4-year-old at Springfield. Now his death was related to legal fireworks, but they were incorrectly stored and he had access to them, and it was just a terrible thing. So, like Scott was saying, it's a pervasive problem in the community. Anybody who's been around 4th of July has seen the awesome display, but there's a lot of risk with that. So if you would like, I'd like to just stop talking here and start entertaining a discussion and answer any questions that we can help you with. Scott is here. We have members of our staff that can also help with some technical answers if you have any questions.
Great. Okay, I will start a queue. First one in it is Councillor Clark.
Thank you, sir. Last year on the 5th of July, two of my constituents, Mr. and Mrs. Chavez, lost 51 years' worth of memories when their house burnt down from an illegal firework. And we know that. I mean, we know that that was an airborne and illegal firework. Personally, I spent 10 years burying mortar tubes on the 4th of July to help with 4th of July shows. So I'm reasonably experienced at knowing when I see illegal fireworks that leave the ground and knowing what a shell looks like coming out of a mortar tube. I know what the concussion sounds like before you see it go up. And I have to say, the first time I spent time in my neighborhood on the 4th of July and heard those concussions and looked around and saw 2- and 3-inch shells within blocks of my house, I was a little bit shocked. And I think it's time for that level of illegal firework use in our community to stop. So this is a matter of enforcement. Now, what we've talked about before with the police department, as great a job as they're doing with this, they're outmatched to the problem, that is the number of people who light things that leave the ground and blow up. So we need a better method of enforcement. Now, I don't pretend to know what that looks like. I asked a couple of years ago if we couldn't enlist the fire department's help in the process of enforcement, but I understand that that's difficult based on their workload, and what they do is not really an enforcement based piece of work, and what they do doesn't lend itself well to do enforcement. I understand that. So I don't have the knowledge of how we might do this, but I'd say that it's high time we have better answers about it and a better plan for enforcement. I don't think that making regular legal fireworks banned throughout the city helps us, because we'll still have people lighting stuff that shouldn't be. What we need to do is enforce the ban on the stuff that blows up and leaves the ground better. Now, technology might be able to help us. Boy, you can get a smartphone app made for a few grand that would, let people download it and go, hey, I know it came from 2 blocks over there, and the GPS in their thing shows right where they are, and maybe you could come up with a locus of where that's coming from quick enough to get an officer there. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But I'm saying we need a better plan. We need a better plan to enforce this well. And I'd like to see us bring some resources to bear to do it, and to talk about it until we have one that can work. And I don't know where we learn other communities' successful enforcement better, but I know that's what I think we need to do. Thank you.
Councilor Poling.
Yeah, I agree with Mike, and I have no desire whatsoever to curb the sale of the legal fireworks. A lot of our nonprofit organizations, that's probably their major moneymaker of the year, is selling the legal fireworks. Having worked in law enforcement, I know the difficulties in trying to enforce the laws on the illegal fireworks, because the call comes in by the time it's dispatched. If there's enough people out on the road to respond to these, by the time you get there, it's long gone. And we all know that our police department is well under the national average of law enforcement officers per 1,000. It's embarrassing how far below the national average this city is. I don't know if it's going to take the technology that Mike's talking about, because boy, it would fool me. I couldn't handle it. Or if it's maybe forming something like the party patrol that they do in the university area for a 2-week period. Because I know from personal experience that these illegal fireworks start well before the 4th of July, at least a week ahead of time, go the whole week of the 4th and a week after. In fact, Sunday night after the Seahawk game, all of a sudden, about a half a dozen of them within probably 2 blocks of my house, they went off. Now, unfortunately, by the time you get out there, they're pretty much gone. I don't know where it came from. I got a good idea, because it's the same fool that does it at the 4th of July. It's not a matter, in my opinion, it's not a matter of people obeying the law. It's the people that have no concern or respect for their neighbors. It's a bunch of idiots out there that just absolutely, their brain, I guess, turns to mush, because there's absolutely no reason to be setting off these illegal fireworks, unless, of course, it's in a sanctioned event. And I will say that even the sanctioned events, I know, like the M's, they have gone to a lower decibel fireworks to try to reduce some of the noise. But even with the sanctioned events, we're still going to get complaints. We're still going to have problems from the people that live in the immediate areas, from, like you were saying earlier, the veterans that are having a hard time dealing with this, the pet owners that have pets that respond in a negative way. So, what the answer is, I don't know, and maybe something similar to the party patrol might work. I think increasing fines if and when people are caught and convicted of this would send a strong message and make it easier to report and enforce these laws, because I know some people don't want to report their neighbors because of the retaliation. There needs to be a better way to do it.
Want another round?
Not yet.
Councilor Surratt.
Yeah, thank you. I think both councilors have expressed quite a lot of similar views and problems. Just thinking about the current dry weather and that we've got fires going on right now, and I know that the fire marshal, the fire chief can declare an emergency around the time of the 4th of July, but that doesn't really seem to be a great way to handle that, because we've already sold the fireworks, people already have them, they're anticipating using them. And, stories of people misusing their illegal fireworks and injuring themselves doesn't really elicit a lot of sympathy from me. But my poor dog, who is terrified out of her wits and has injured herself many times in spite of our best efforts to protect her, is simply an innocent victim of this situation. And we've received emails and communications from many folks out in the community who've experienced the same kind of problems with their pets, drugs, isolation, loud music in the house. It's still an ongoing problem. I basically have to leave my neighborhood for the 4th of July and leave town. And now apparently I can go to Ashland, because Ashland has banned fireworks completely. We learned from the information we got in our packet. So I would like to know if it's possible if we could speak with the folks in Ashland and get some sense on how that's worked for them, how they enforce it. Obviously, they're a smaller city than we are, but I still think we might have some lessons to learn there. And just as Councilor Pulling said, in my neighborhood, the discharge of illegal fireworks starts weeks ahead of 4th of July and continues well into August. And I also think there's peer pressure. One, I think neighbors don't want to burden the police by calling because they know they've got a lot on their plates. But two, they don't want to look like the Grinch on the 4th of July. And so I think a lot of folks may object but don't speak up. So I wonder, we do have a great cadre of volunteers in policing, and obviously they don't have enforcement powers, but sometimes just being a presence can make a difference. So I don't know if we thought about a strategy where we engage those folks. And I understand that sometimes with DUI, which I wouldn't compare illegal fireworks with DUI, but there is enforcement after the fact. And one of the complaints we've heard from folks is that they've seen the person, or they know who's discharged the illegal fireworks, but the police officer who comes to investigate says, we can't enforce because we didn't witness it. So I don't know if there's any strategies around that piece that, if I take a picture and I have evidence of this illegal activity, can there be some enforcement after the fact? And I agree that looking at fines and making those fairly serious would be one way to get at that issue. Thank you.
Councilor Evans.
So I have a couple questions, not a statement or a speech. And I see that we have ORS regulations in place in terms of a fine structure as far as this is concerned. What's the max that we can go as a city in terms of the amount of fines that we could issue? Do we have a limit? Because I think that if we make it high enough and 2 or 3 or 4 people get those fines, the word will get out real fast, and you'll see a whole lot of this stuff not just curbed, but will be stopped.
I think a partial answer to that is that's been alluded to in the conversation already and that staff discussed was the importance of community involvement in changing the behaviors, public education of things like that, the impacts on their neighbors as well as the fines. Referring to the AIS, some of the state laws that are applied for illegal fireworks, for example, unlawful sale or possession of fireworks, is a Class B misdemeanor. That's one of the lowest fireworks offenses, and it's punishable by a maximum of 6 months in jail and a $2,500 fine. Some of the other related crimes can even be felonies, punishable by more than a year in jail and more than $100,000 in fines, depending on the circumstances. So some of the penalties, particularly around either reckless or dangerous use of fireworks or use of the illegal fireworks, are substantial. Not necessarily widely known, but are substantial.
I was asking more specifically about our position as a council being able to issue or create a statute with fines for us here locally, municipally, on the books.
Councilor Evans, I think the $2,500 fine that Lieutenant Philman referred to is one that our police department can arrest for, issue citations for. So,
Could we
what is the absolute
increase
upper,
that?
What is the absolute upper limit? I'd have to do some research and let you know.
Okay, that's the question I'm asking. What's the
Typically-
upper limit? The higher the fine, the better the deterrent. Because people will know if you're getting into your pocket, then that will, and a couple people get those fines, that will stop the behavior, or at least severely curb the behavior.
I put myself in mostly for questionings. Are there any fireworks that are legal that make significant noise?
The issue of what is significant noise
Right.
is, of course, subjective.
Or make noise?
Yeah, definitely that make noise. Fireworks that you can buy at a legal licensed fireworks stand make exploding loud bangs and pops and whistles and a variety of loud noises.
Yeah. I also had a dog like Claire's who just absolutely freaked out. And within the context of what is currently legal, you can drive animals crazy and other kinds of things like that. So we're talking about a continuum where the line of what's legal and what's illegal only resolves part of the issue. It maybe preserves life and safety, but it doesn't prevent other kinds of nuisance that some folks, and I realize it's a subjective area, but some folks would say any noise drives my dog crazy and I want all fireworks banned. On the other hand, I don't want to take sparklers and black cats away from children. I think that's part of the 4th of July, and that's a lot of fun. But the enforcement then becomes the key issue, because how do you allow people to have sprinklers and fountains, and then as you gradually go up the continuum, where do you then suddenly start to have, the heavy hand of the police come down to enforce something? That's just absolutely mind-boggling in terms of how you would do it. What you're really talking about is changing irresponsible behavior. And what is the role of the city? What is the possible role of the city in trying to change irresponsible behavior? Talking on a cell phone while you're driving. We passed a law to say you can't talk on a cell phone while you're driving because it's incredibly dangerous, but people ignore it all the time because they want to be irresponsible. They'd rather talk on their phone. So I see this as being a similar kind of situation. We can ban whatever we want to, but if we set ourselves up for something that's unenforceable in whatever configuration, then we've sent the signal that your community passes a law and you don't have to obey it because they've got no way to enforce it. So I'm only interested in whatever regulation we can put in place that actually has teeth. It means I am interested in finding a solution, but it's got to be a solution that's enforceable and has teeth. I am not interested in gestures. I want us to do something positive, and I don't want to punish children, but I do want to the degree we can, curb irresponsible behavior within our community. So that's more of a best outcome than it is anything else. But to me, that would be an ideal if we could find what that is. Councilor Zelinka.
So fireworks are already illegal. The ones that we're talking about, the biggest problem is the noise and the impacts they have, and the impacts on veterans that have PTSD is something more people should really think about. It's very sad. I wish I also had a buck for every time a constituent or someone's talked to me about how their pets have freaked out. And personally, I have had pets freak out as well and hide under the bed and just shiver. And the property and personal damage is well documented, well known, and often tragic. But it's really about the misuse and abuse. I was sitting on deck of my friend's house, and a bottle rocket went screaming across our table. So that's misuse and dangerous. I don't have any problem with the public displays, kind of Mike was involved in. Even if we restricted it to the dates of July 4th, July 5th, December 31st, 1st, or even if we banned them outright, it's really a matter of enforcement. It's all about enforcement. How many citations have we actually given for $2,500?
I couldn't tell you the exact answer to that. What I can tell you from a resource standpoint, on 4th of July last year, we had around 340 police calls for service. In addition to that, we had 247 complaints related specifically to fireworks. And on most 4th of Julys that I've worked, we simply haven't had the resources on duty with our regular staffing to do fireworks enforcement, whether it's noise-related or existing fireworks laws. So if we're going to pursue a stronger enforcement, that would require finding some resources in order to provide the staff to do that work.
Do you have a ballpark of how many citations were issued?
For fireworks?
Yeah.
I'm afraid I don't. Very, very few because of the level of the other fireworks, or excuse me, the other calls for service.
Right. And Claire had a good question about how enforcement can occur when it's not seen by an officer. Is there an answer to that?
For crimes, for the jailable offenses, where we're able to put a case together, we can make arrests on probable cause after the fact. It takes some doing, but it can be done.
So really, enforcement to me is really about staffing. It's really a matter of money, getting more person power out there. We really need to actually figure out a revenue source so we can do more of this. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. We can't do the overtime on our budget to have that all happen. What if there's an increase in the permits that people require, that are required to get to sell them? What if we had a surcharge on the sale of fireworks? It might end up being there's such a quantity of it that it's a modest amount that doesn't really impact people that much, but it actually creates a fund to go out and do the additional enforcement. I'm thinking more along those lines, because everything we do is it all boils down to enforcement. And if we could take maybe some of that money and do an education campaign. One of the things, and finally, one of the things that they came up with in the 2008 study, on the last page of it, at the very bottom, additional solutions to consider, was number 8, develop a database of fireworks-related complaints, responses, injuries that can be used effectively to tailor education and enforcement efforts. I think we do have the tools since 2008, that was quite a long time ago, to be able to do this quite efficiently, effectively within our data-led policing, to be able to create a database where we could figure out where this is occurring, who the people are, year after year, and then have a ratcheted up kind of fines that maybe gets their attention. It's really about accountability. Once you know it's illegal, then it's really about accountability.
Okay. Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. I have brought this up asked for work sessions year after year. I gave up after a while. Last year is the first year I think I didn't ask for one. And always not at this time of year, but right after the 4th of July, thinking that's the time when it's fresh in people's minds, and also it's the time when, if we decided to ban all of them, it would be before the nonprofits had ordered their fireworks. I think the only way to do it is to have a significant fine, and it couldn't be just $100, even though to me that's significant. I just got a $100 fine out at Mount Pisgah because my parking thing had expired. And that's enough for me to make me be sure I keep looking at the expiration date. But for people who want to, they've spent well over $100 on fireworks, the people who have, and it would have to be a really significant fine to be a deterrent, I think. And I think it's very difficult to say if they're illegal or legal when I see people getting ready for a big party on the 4th of July, I know it's going to be noisy. And it's probably going to have things flying through the air. I've found things in my driveway that didn't come from very close, but they came there the next morning. And I've been worried about the fire danger. At first I was worried mainly about the South Hills, where fire could sweep through the whole place if it starts. And then when I talked about it one year, I started getting calls from people out on River Road who were also really worried about fires and were worried about the noise, and not only about veterans being subjected to loud noises, but people who are ill and people who are mentally ill who go crazy. And the pets, everybody knows about that. Personally, I've been fortunate that none of my dogs have gone crazy, but I know I've had friends who lose their dogs they just bolt. and maybe with a leash on, even just tear away and they can't find them. And they find them later in someone's garage or hovering under a house somewhere or something. And that alone is reason enough to ban them, I think. I really think it's time, and I don't think there's support for this, but I think it's time just to say that no fireworks are legal except the public, well-supervised displays, which should happen only on maybe 2 nights a year so that people could prepare for it. But I would not like us to wait until huge numbers of houses burn, which is, I think, is a real danger. And I think if the police show up and people are having a big party, they can see a police car coming or get warned and say, we're just doing legal fireworks and having a little party. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving into second round, Councilor Clark.
Thank you. Let's talk about context for a second for enforcement. I'm sure that the officers that are present here have to have at least some degree of emotional reaction to this, because in the world they live in every day, we're talking about wanting to enforce this more stringently, and I think it should be. But if my iPad were sitting on my front porch and somebody walked up and walked off with it, this is a $500 item, the chances of that ever getting recovered are slim to none, and even if it did, the chances of prosecution are probably slim to none, because the county hasn't the resources to do that. So, in an environment where many crimes are below the capacity of our system to address appropriately and reasonably, this becomes one of those where it's a hot button issue for this time period. But the reality is we don't have anywhere near the number of personnel to do this. Now, secondarily, the statutory stuff here, and we're talking about getting into felonies, that's a pretty significant, penalty for doing some of this stuff. But all of that is state-based, so it's going to the circuit court, and none of the money that would ever be collected for those fines is going to come to the city of Eugene. It's going to go to the state, it's going to go to the county. So I would suggest if we were considering creating a municipal ordinance against this that carried a municipal fine that would come to the city, I'd be much more in favor of that than taxing legal fireworks or events to pay for an increased amount of enforcement. But I'd be interested in creating that municipal offense and municipal fine to levy, and a pretty significant one, for the purpose of enlisting technology to aid us. We need more eyeballs on the street than we have. We need more information collection than we have. And we need more ways to do it, like red light cameras. I'm not suggesting that's what we do here, but that's a way where, there can't be enough police officers to see everybody run every red light. But red light cameras were a technological response to an enforcement problem. So that's my suggestion here, is that we need to enlist the people of our community. We need to enlist technology, and because we won't touch this anywhere near the problem if we just want police officers to respond. There aren't enough of them. We're going to have to get creative with this, and like I said, I would be willing to move, I suppose, to send the manager to work with police staff to develop something for our perusal on this subject before we hit late spring, so that we have some time to talk about it. I don't know how to word that, except
We may not.
maybe we don't need a motion.
We may not need a motion. What we may need is some direction for what we'd like to have next.
And just to say that and fill that out from my perspective, it needs to be a significant municipal fine where the city keeps the money so we can afford additional resources. It needs to enlist larger numbers of people in the process of data collection. It needs to create an opportunity for people to create long-term database collections so we know year after year where this stuff happens, and make more use of our police officers' time than we have officers to do.
Okay, we're over time, so if you want to, are you good?
Yeah, I am. I don't need a motion on that. I think the manager gets it.
Well, yeah. What I was going to say, what would be helpful is just to get a sense of where the council is. So for just a couple of things. One is our approach, as you see the AIS, is sort of a gradual approach, which means up the education, work with neighborhood associations, limit the days that you can actually discharge them so you have a better sense of what's going on out there. What I'm hearing, and then the next step potentially is bringing in the technology to do some of that, put more eyes on the street somehow without actually having them eyes, so that maybe is another piece. What I'm hearing, though, is maybe we also want to up the fines. We've talked about enforcement. Enforcement is not cheap. We can bring back options, and we would want to make sure we set expectations. So if we spend an extra $200,000 a year on enforcement, the expectation can't be that there's no fireworks, because the reality is there still will be. It's just maybe there's fewer of them. And so it would be helpful for us to know where on this whole scale you really want us to pursue and come back to you. It will be difficult to come back before your break in the spring unless you choose to not do something that's already on the calendar. So we just need to think about that as well.
Understood. Good perspective. Thank you. Councilor Zelenka, then Evans.
So, being specific, I'm good with limiting it to 2 nights. I'm good with coming up with an enforcement strategy, whether that be higher fines or issuing a bunch of citations. Several handfuls of citations get people's attention. All of a sudden, $2,500 fines and maybe more will get people's attention about this. Third, I think you're absolutely right. This is about enforcement. Enforcement's very expensive in this case. What we're talking about is overtime police officers, basically, and it's going to be not cheap to do that. So if we want to do that, we need a revenue source. Whether that be, I think it's probably a mix of things, whether that be higher fines that you take and put in the pool for next year, a surcharge on sale of fireworks, a slight increase in the permit fees. We do a lot of permits for this. And then finally, I think also the use of database and technology for the enforcement to occur. I think all those 4 things I think I can get behind.
Okay. Councilor Evans.
Another quick question. Could this be put in the context of fire code violations, and could the fire marshal, by extension through firefighters, because they ride through my neighborhood every 4th of July, and people are shooting off fireworks, and could they be, charged with some kind of way to issue a citation for violations of the fire code, for example? So if we restructured or developed an ordinance that would allow the fire department to be able to also issue citations as a part of a fire code amendment that would, pull this in here, that might help us a little bit in terms of enforcement.
Legally, it may be, and that could be a legal question. From a policy perspective, I would want to think about that and have some conversations with the chief, because it's a significant change, I think, in how firefighters on a routine basis go about doing their job, and I know there's some pros and cons to that. So if that's something that's of interest, I'd want to make sure we bring the chief into that conversation.
Because I would, I'm not saying do this, but I would like to explore it in terms of, the fact that we got firefighters already out there kind of patrolling, looking to put out maybe some potential situations that are coming up in certain neighborhoods where you see the concentration of fireworks going off. If they can do that, that would extend our ability to be able to curb the situation, vis-a-vis our police department.
And we can, I can ask the chief, just one minor thing, our firefighters actually aren't out patrolling. What they'll be doing is responding to calls, and so they may be going back and forth to a call, which may be a little bit different than proactively patrolling for issues.
Well, if they're out responding to a call and they come upon something, that would be, in my mind, a way to issue a citation. If they're out actually having to put out a fire or dealing with a situation, they can immediately address that.
So
without
we have the
having to bring the
chief
police
spend a
in.
little time thinking about that.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got 3 people in the queue and 5 minutes left, so with your indulgence, I'm going to move to 2-minute rounds to make sure everybody gets in. Next person in the queue is Councilor Surratt.
Thanks. I just had a couple of questions. So right now, we don't have any limits on there's no restriction on when fireworks can be set off other than a noise ordinance in terms of 10 o'clock at night. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay. I had heard somewhere
Sales are.
that they were illegal not on certain days. So I would definitely support creating a limitation in terms of legal fireworks and when legal fireworks can be used as a way to help with overall enforcement against illegal fireworks. And then Councilor Zelenka's been referring to permitting that we do. So do we permit some of the large organized displays like they have at PK Park?
That's correct.
Yeah.
We
And so
permit
we
all
pay
of
a
them.
permit fee for that, to get that permit?
$175.
Okay. And then the folks that set up stands to sell them, do they also pay a permit to
Yep.
do that?
Yes, they do.
I mean, the one thing we run into there is they can go set themselves up in Springfield and sell from Springfield without, if depending on, if we calculate, if we raise the permit fee too far, that would not be a good balance on that.
Yeah.
And then, I've had my own little personal daydream of the Vigilante Soaker Hose Brigade going out.
Okay. Councilor Taylor.
I think Claire mentioned volunteers a little while ago, but could we use police volunteers to call the police to the places where they're needed?
My sense of it is that getting the calls about the illegal activity isn't an issue. We get lots of those.
Yeah,
The issue is having enough officers to respond to those calls and take enforcement action, which the volunteers wouldn't be able to
I
do.
was thinking you might trust the volunteers more than a homeowner who just sees a party happening and thinks they're going to be fireworks.
In my personal experience, I have yet to be lied to by a homeowner about illegal fireworks use. I would trust them absolutely.
But you just can't get there.
Exactly.
Do you find that sometimes if you do get there that there's nothing to see at that point?
Sometimes that happens. Particularly if it takes a long time to get there, sometimes they've used up all their fireworks and have gone inside or gone
Maybe
somewhere
they
else.
saw the police car coming.
Or maybe they saw the police car. We're fairly sneaky when we approach things, but that happens.
No lights or sirens.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Last person in the queue, Councilor Poling.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in reducing the days that the legal fireworks can be set off unless it coincides with the current schedule of when they can be sold. I just think that limiting it to 2 or 3 days a year is not the way to go. It's tradition. The other thing, I appreciate Greg's creative thinking on the use of firefighters, but, I remember the days when I was out on the street, the firefighters were the good guys. When you had a major scene, the police were the bad guys, the firefighters were the good guys. There's a certain amount of trust, I think, in the public with firefighters that, they're allowed into people's homes without warrants, for emergency reasons.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that firefighters do that, as the public sees them, they are the good guys. And I don't want to taint that in any way where people are going to be reluctant to maybe call for help from the fire department when it's absolutely needed.
I don't think that'd happen. I think they will.
I mean, they can always be another set of eyes and report it back. But then again, like they were saying, it's getting somebody in there on time to actually be able to do the enforcement. So I would not really be in favor of putting an enforcement handle onto the firefighters on this.
Okay.
Can I just-
Scott, we all think you're good guys.
I think
thank you.
Lieutenant Feldman looks like a good guy, too.
So what I hear is perhaps you'd like the whole full suite of options from doing a little bit of education all the way up to increased fines and significant enforcement and all those options in between to come back to you, and you can kind of pick and
Pros and
choose what
cons,
you
what
want.
works, what doesn't.
That won't right now occur until after your break. And so as we approach July 4th, we'll just be conscious of what that actually means in terms of this a July 4th holiday. So we'll bring back the full suite of options.
Good. Keeping us grounded in what's possible is always important. That being the business of this work session, I will adjourn it to the regular meeting at 7:30.
Good luck with that.